Hello everyone, it's me, Teddy. We've gotten pretty deep into this Winx rewrite, haven't we? Looking back at all of the characters we've talked about is crazy. Thank you all so much for coming along on this little writing adventure with me. Stay tuned until the end, because there's an announcement during the final looks that I hope you'll like. And if you do enjoy this video, maybe drop a like and a sub and stuff. It is incredibly helpful. You know how YouTube is. But since we've been going through the cast and now have even done some designs separate from Winx, I was kind of missing our girls. And so I have decided that in preparation for their time on Earth, away from the Mother Dragon's world of creation, the Winx will be taking some magical boosters with them. During their first semester at Linphea, they learned to manifest their Winx forms, the most basic level a fairy can achieve. And boy, do they look simple. I don't dislike my original designs, I really do think they're fine. But I hate the fact that they're a lower resolution than the rest of the designs, and I truly think I can just do much better now. So, just as I have improved in my drawing and conceptualizing and video quality, the girls have also improved as fairies. They will have to manifest a way to carry this magical energy boost, or Charmix, with them. And since they'll be consciously changing their transformations anyway, everyone has decided to update their forms overall. And so, I present to you an exceedingly rare fairy form within the world of my rewrite, Charmix. In preparation for these redesigns, I've gone back and re-watched the videos I did for the girls for the first time in a while, and yikes. I was recording the voiceover in my closet using the mic on a pair of Skull Candy earbuds I bought at the campus store of my college like 2 years earlier. It was super rough listening to myself. You can definitely tell I didn't really know where I was going at first, and that I just had no idea how to script out a video. I've certainly gotten a lot more confident about talking to an audience as well, and I think a big part of that is that my audience is wonderful. I truly look forward to getting to read your comments. Another big change is that while I had watched through Winx and felt like I was pretty familiar with it, I definitely underestimated just how much there was to know. How did I make a whole episode about Bloom and not know that her last name was Peters? Bloom is my favorite character too. I just don't feel like I did her justice with this video or this drawing. I'll be doing these redesigns as a base and then drawing their outfit over it the way that I usually do in redesigns. That way, if I want, I can go back later and redraw their casual outfits as well, just for like sprite usage and stuff later on. I said I didn't know where I was going in these first videos, but I meant it mostly in terms of the channel and how I would go about things like creation process and formatting. When it came to the rewrite itself, there was a pretty solid skeleton for what it would become. For example, I bring up the concept of there being two types of fairies, one that serves as the protector for a place, object, etc., and one that exists as the personification of something. And these two types of fairies would have certain differences in their training and education. But I didn't even have a name for the latter kind of fairy yet. I just knew the first one was a guardian fairy, and that's what Bloom is. This means that at Linphea, she will be in some classes focused on fighting techniques and battle strategy. My original design for her is frail and skinny, and I did mention that I would want her to visibly gain muscle as time goes on, so I tried to show that in this new design. Stuff like that really gets my animation heart beating, like how in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Zuko's body changes a lot as he goes from constantly training on a ship with a full crew to being a wandering loner on the verge of starving, to finally being with the gang as Aang's instructor. We also see it with Willow in the Owl House. When we're first introduced to her, she's a young teen with a chubby physique, and as she becomes a flyer derby player, she gets into working out and weightlifting, and while she's still chubby, you can tell that there's a difference in her body, even with the show's simpler art style. I could go on, but I'll spare you all. Some of my favorite things about Bloom are her curious nature and passionate spirit. As I said in my original video, she's had a fire inside her all her life waiting to break free. I love her short temper and how confrontational she is, even as a newbie in a totally foreign world. I see her as the life force of the show, and her boldness and courage has always captivated me. Okay, let's talk about her story a bit. Centuries ago, a mighty empire called Domino was wiped out by a monstrous villain hell-bent on becoming the most powerful being in the world. He decimated their forces, and as he approached the castle, the king and queen made their last stand, bravely meeting the evil on their doorstep with fierce resistance. Their teen daughter, Daphne, the Fairy of Youth, hid inside as her parents were cut down. In desperation, she ran to the nursery where her baby sister slept and took her into her arms. A voice spoke from the shadows. "Don't worry, dear fairy. The war will be over soon." A young man stood and began to approach, and without hesitating, Daphne tore down the halls of the castle until at last she was cornered. Out of love for her sister, the Fairy of Youth summoned all her strength and was able to transport Bloom to safety, and that safety sent her not only through space, but time as well. And Daphne was struck down in that moment, and her sacrifice earned her the power of Nymphics. Bloom ended up on Earth and was adopted by Mike and Vanessa, though it seems from her obsession with fairy tales and fantasy that part of her never forgot where she came from. I love nerdy Bloom. I love her being an artist, and I imagine her writing stories and always getting into a new hobby or craft. She's a little ball of energy and is just always doing something, especially once she gets to Alphea, since she continues her Earth education alongside her fairy studies so she can get her high school diploma. This Bloom is 17 when the story starts, by the way. I ended up changing her colors a teeny tiny bit, and I think she looks a lot more vibrant. I also made her hair a bit longer since this is technically a season 2 look, and I think she would have let her hair grow out. I kept her curtain bangs and her little cowlick that makes that one piece just never listen. To be honest, I think it looks a lot more fiery now, and I'm really happy with it. When I started this rewrite, I had this idea I was making my designs simple so they would be easy to animate. But as time went on, I seemed to care less and less about that, and now I just wanted to give the girls something juicier. It's really popular for Bloom redesigns to give her armor, which always looks so cool, and I really think it suits her, so I wanted to add just a little sprinkle of that concept to show that now she's really embracing the part of being a fairy that she didn't really think about in the beginning, the responsibility. However, I didn't totally go in the armor direction because I still think Charmix is more of a half upgrade from Magic Winx. So I want it to be clearly inspired by her original look, which I love. Actually, I've been kind of regretting the way I did her wings. They're just so simple that they feel lazy. So instead of fully changing them, I decided to add this notch in her right wing, which I imagine she probably got in the fight with Darkar or something. It brings back a little of the shape of her wings from the show, but keeps the design I gave her at the very beginning of all of this. Truly, I am a creature ruled by nostalgia. Anyways, yeah, I gave her a bit of armor to her design with this mantle, which I imagine has iron, but then I was conflicted because in folklore, fairies are hurt by iron. However, talking it through with my partner, he suggested a way for me to tie it into the lore that I think is just genius, so I have to include it. In summary, the people who moved to Earth after Valtor's attacks fully gave up magic, and so my partner suggested that without their powers to defend themselves, many of them became skilled with swords and shields. And so, to these groups, iron became sort of a symbol against fairies and magic, and eventually incorporated into the legend as we know it. So, Bloom wearing iron is an accidental reference to her being from Earth, and also an accidental slight against the wizards using a symbol of their ancestors' anti-magic stance. I just love it. Oh, it's so good. God, I've been talking so much. Okay, anyways, let's just take a look at her actual Charmix.
Oh, what's that? It's a Charmix! My magic, it feels stronger.
So, since the girls are creating the vessels for which to hold the Charmix energy themselves as part of their fairy form, I want them all to be a unique style that meshes with those designs and their characters. For Bloom, her Charmix is meant to evoke the look of a dagger holstered to her leg. The glass is faceted in a way that implies a sharp edge, and the gold on top mimics the hilt of a dagger. I also added in a little flame imagery because, of course, I really like how it sort of subtly goes with her armor and the other sharp elements of her design here, and I'm really happy with it. Okay, on to Stella, Princess of Solaria. As you know, I've combined the many worlds of Winx Club into one single world called Magix. I did this mostly in the effort to make things more manageable for myself, but also because I don't like the idea of a single kingdom governing an entire planet. Earth isn't just one nation, it's full of diverse cultures and peoples and history, and I like the idea of alien planets being the same way. I even like the idea that there are parts of the world we don't know much about because they're just so far away. I think it makes the world feel big and alive, just like ours. There are some global superpowers, though. Empires that stretch far and wide across the land, and one of those superpowers is Solaria. You can hear more about it in the map video, but it's a nation that I've incorporated some other Winx worlds into as cities and towns. Anyways, Stella is the crowned princess of this massive country. Her parents are still divorced, and she mostly lives with her dad in the castle. But as a result of the divorce, he is very busy with handling the country, which would usually be a joint effort. So she is a bit of a wild child, seeking out attention from her subjects, to whom she is a beloved celebrity. She's definitely a trendsetter and fashion icon. However, this kind of life does not lend well to making strong connections. So when the Winx come together, she is intensely loyal to them and cherishes them deeply. Her relationship with Brandon is a similar way. The two of them are completely head over heels for each other and are the first couple to get together. She does think he's the mysterious Prince Sky at that point, so it's sort of the source of their initial interest, but it's his personality that really gets her to fall in love. The two are silly and playful with each other, and despite their flirty natures, are totally devoted. It's important to me that this poor girl is in a stable, happy romance after what she saw her parents go through, and that Brandon is with someone who appreciates him for who he is, but that's in his video. Stella's design is dear to me, but I'm not very happy with how I drew her, especially her fairy form. I feel like the anatomy is just not where I want it to be, as well as a bunch of other little things that have started to stick out to me over time. So I'm excited to get to rectify them. My Stella is the tallest of the Winx and the oldest. She's 19 when the story starts, while the rest of the girls are 18, besides Bloom. She failed a bunch of her classes her first year at Linphea because despite adoring being a fairy, she didn't really take it seriously. Plus, she was going to a lot of parties due to her seeking out some kind of connection. Once she has a stable place to come back to with the Winx and Brandon, her studies will improve greatly, by her standards. Another reason for her struggle with academia is that she straight up has ADHD. She has trouble focusing on things that don't give her those dopamine hits, and when she's feeling dysregulated in so many other aspects of her life, she just can't get herself to study. In the first design I did for her fairy form, she still has the staff that was given when she first got her wings to help in directing her magic, but I think by season 2 she probably doesn't need it anymore. The staff is a cool prop and an interesting character design thing, but I just can't see a good reason for her to still have it by season 2. Stella is the Fairy of the Shining Sun, a sort of theatrical fairy title for a girl who is very much deserving of such a vibe. She is an embodiment fairy like her mom, who is Fairy of the Moon, and is the only Winx to be one until Aisha joins the group. As an embodiment fairy, her personality is likely to match her title, and I think it is very clear that that is the case. Stella is a beacon of light and warmth that instantly lifts the energy of a room. I also think it makes perfect sense that the Fairy of the Shining Sun would be best friends, practically adopted sisters, with the Fairy of the Dragon Flame. It's almost poetic to me. Two blazing fires that fuel the life of magics, and two girls that come together to save it. Stella's magic is more focused on light than heat and power like Bloom's is. She has perfect color vision, can see very well in the dark, and can practically blind her opponents. Temporarily, we hope. She is stronger in bright sunlight and loves to go to the beach and sunbathe. Her Earth equivalent ethnicity is Moroccan, so her skin is naturally medium toned, but she is quite tan on top of that. I think she is also probably immune to melanoma somehow. Magic is fun. Stella is the first person Bloom meets in Magix. I rewrote a bunch of episodes from the first season for funsies, and in the first episode of my version, they meet at the beach on Earth. I think Stella enjoys feeling the rays of Earth's sun and describes it as a different sensation than Magix's sun that only she can really distinguish. Using means that she has access to as the princess of one of the most powerful countries in the world, she's able to go through small portals between the two worlds. Since Stella is a beautiful, magical alien princess, I want her to be someone that would make you stop in your tracks. She's the tallest of the Winx, standing at 5'11", but usually adding a good few inches depending on her shoes because she adores heels, of course. Her hair is incredibly long and silky, and the platinum blonde catches the sunlight in an ethereal shimmer. Her eyes are a shade of gold, so bright they almost seem to radiate light of their own. Bloom has a striking look to her herself, with such vibrant red hair and blue eyes. To us, it's clear that she isn't an ordinary human, but she gets the same feeling looking at Stella. And I feel like I just didn't capture this vibe properly with her first design. The difference between it and this new one is kind of crazy. I think the inspiration of her original design is clear in the base parts of this new outfit, despite how different it has become. Her top is still asymmetrical, she's still wearing shorts, she still has tall boots, and of course, she still has her iconic pigtails. However, I wanted to add in elements that sort of feel like rays of light, so she has a lot of strappy parts to her outfit. Her top connects to her boots, which continue the movement down with these swirling stripes. I knew I wanted the boot pattern to spiral instead of being straight down her legs because it sort of mimics the movement in her hair, and by adding curves to the stripes, it matches the shape of her neckline. This might not make any sense, but in my head, it also shows a bit of her connections to the moon in a very subdued way. Like, if you combine the straight lines of rays of light with the crescent shape of the moon, you kind of end up with something like this. Stella is the fairy of the shining sun, and moonlight is reflected sunlight, so she still has that element to her while not having a fairy title that is just a list of things. Also, her mother is fairy of the moon, and I think in season 2 she would start talking to her mom a bit more, so maybe she would want to add lunar motifs into her looks, at least like a little bit. That's why her Charmix incorporated a silver moon encompassing the orange glass within. She's started reconnecting with her mom before the mission, and now she misses her extra bad. Also, since wings are physical features and part of a fairy's body, I like to imagine that Stella's wings look very similar, if not exact, to her mother's. At first, I wasn't sure about putting her Charmix on a belly chain because I was worried it would be too big and end up looking kind of clunky and silly, but I'm actually pretty happy with it now. I think it flows well with the other straps and lines on the design, and the metal part ties in with her bracers. Also, as I said, my Stella is Moroccan, or she would be if she was from Earth, you know the deal. And I'm pretty sure waist chains are a thing in Morocco. I've been trying to research them, but all I'm getting are freaking ads to buy them. So if anyone knows firsthand, please let me know if this is true. Thank you. I'm glad it makes her Charmix feel like jewelry as well, since I didn't really give her any for this look. I do think Stella is a major jewelry girly, but with the amount of sparkle in this outfit, I thought adding more elements would make the whole thing way too busy. That's also why I made her boots partially sheer. I think it somehow just tones down the whole thing a bit, and it makes her feel less covered up, which I think makes sense. Without the sheer panels, she's got almost her entire legs covered, and for a fairy of the sun, that's just like a little odd, you know? One more note about her boots. They are not platforms. I know, it feels blasphemous. Don't worry, she still wears them in her other outfits. I just really liked the way these shoes came to a point. The top of her look has the sharp points of her wings, and I like the way that this shape is brought down to the bottom of her design too. Plus, Bloom is wearing massive platforms, and with such a big height difference between them, I like the way their fairy forms bring them closer to being eye level with each other. They're best friends from two different worlds, and being fairies brought them together despite everything. I just think it's nice. Our final redesign for this video is Flora, a patient, mellow soul to bring the first two back down to ground level. She's calm, rational, and treats her magic as a science. Flora grew up in Linphea, a town in Solaria thought to be the place where the mother dragon first touched down upon the world. Here, a sacred garden endures, cultivated and protected by one of the very first fairies to ever exist. Side note, would you guys be interested in a video devoted to that first group of fairies? Let me know. I think it could make for some really interesting stories. Flora is the apprentice of the caretaker of this garden, and so one day will take over as the fairy in charge. Fairy mentors are something I haven't really talked about in a while, but they're pretty common in this world. When a fairy discovers the source of their magic, aka their fairy title, there may actually be a fairy who has the same one. It happens more often with guardian fairies that their lifetimes will overlap, and so the older fairy will take on the role of mentoring the younger fairy to one day hold the torch. You guys gave some really good suggestions on what to name Flora's mentor, and I was torn between a few of them, but I think I'm gonna go with Iris. I think it fits a sweet older lady who's passing on wisdom, and I like that it's also part of the eye, so it's like she has seen a lot or something. However, when the story starts, Iris has already passed on, and so while Flora is at school, the garden is being looked after by the acolytes who live on the grounds. I think it's interesting that despite being best friends, Bloom and Stella aren't roommates at school. It does make sense though, and I think Flora really is the perfect roommate for Bloom. She's the most motherly of the group, and I think that's something Bloom would really need and appreciate as she tries to settle into this new place away from her family. Also, I think having her be the guardian fairy of Linphea Garden, the place where the mother dragon lived as she prepared to lay her dragon egg, makes the fact that she now lives with the long-lost fairy of the dragon flame a sweet moment of serendipity. It feels like they were destined to meet, and I love the fact that they're both so connected to the history of the world. I want to emphasize Flora's scientist side again. It plays a big part in the Murda pumpkin arc, and I think will come into play a lot with her magic with regards to different types of plants and their properties. You know how in order for Momo Yaoyorozu's quirk to really be effective, she needs to understand the composition of different materials? I think it would kind of be like that. Because of her extensive studies, Flora is very familiar with the properties of different plants, and so is able to concoct poultices and potions with them that can do different things. I think this would be a good way for her to function as the healer of the Winx. I mean, Bloom technically does have healing abilities, but she's gonna be very busy doing other stuff during battles. And like, sometimes she gets kidnapped or nerfed in some way, so it makes sense to have another person who can play medic. And I think Flora fits right into that archetype while still being unique with the science aspect of it. There would probably be a boost to her understanding with her magic somehow, kind of like how in Eve has an instinctual understanding of physics and chemistry due to her powers, but I wouldn't go quite as far as that for Flora. She still needs to study and experiment, but it comes easier to her than it would to, say, Stella. Meanwhile, color theory comes easier to Stella than it would to Flora. Does that make sense? Flora is also the only Winx girl in season 1 of the original show to not have a love interest among the specialists. But since my Flora is pansexual, she gets to have a sort of mini romance with Murda before we meet Helia later. Flora spends a lot of time with Murda while she works to break the spell that the Tricks put on her, and her powers allow her to be the only one that can communicate with her in her pumpkin form. They both feel the tension, and after Murda turns back into her normal self, they share a few intimate moments together. Ultimately, Murda does end up with Lucy, but she and Flora stay friends and can often be seen hanging out after Murda transfers to Althea. I had a pretty specific vision for Flora's fairy form that I was really excited to get another chance at trying to achieve. I want it to feel delicate and romantic, but also convey that she's the head caretaker of a very important spiritual location. She exudes grace and serenity and a quiet confidence that only adds to her allure. Flora is a grounded and grounding person. To Bloom, while Stella is the friend that represents the exciting and fantastical side of her new life, Flora represents the return home and building of a found family. Her color palette is a much lower contrast than Stella's, and she has a very human-feeling hair and eye color, brunette hair and hazel eyes. The blonde in her hair is even bleached, a difference to Stella's natural platinum. Still, Flora is ethereal in her own way. I hope I managed to accurately portray her kind eyes and gentle smile. She's a beautiful person. Something I really wanted to change from her first design is the length of her skirt. I realized after I finished that design that the chubbiest member of the Winx had a fairy form that covered her up significantly more than anyone else. I mean, I guess technically not as much as Tecna, but Tecna's outfit is also skin tight. I know I was going for a sort of businesswoman meets bridesmaid thing, and that her first outfit was pretty skimpy, but it just felt wrong to do that to her. Felt way too matronly for a young woman, and I think set a bad example that the heavier girl had the plainest outfit. So I made her even heavier and tried to design a fairy form that shows off her body. I took a lot more inspiration from her original form from the show, too. Her bodice became this boned corset so she can have some support for the girls. Since I gave her shorter gloves meant to echo gardening gloves, I added these off-the-shoulder bits to her top that I think make the whole thing feel very dreamy. Since I got rid of her flower necklace, I gave her these little rose embellishments, too. I never really liked the way her skirt looked in the original design. I think it's supposed to be like flower petals, but it's a bit awkward. So to bring in that asymmetrical movement, I gave her this side bustle. I think it's so cute. In the first two designs, I ended up with an element that I tried to incorporate throughout the look to tie everything together. For Bloom, it was ruffles to add a more delicate element alongside her iron mantle and huge stompy platforms. Plus, it kind of evokes the movement of a flame in a way. For Stella, it was the long lines of her straps and stripes, representing rays of light, but also complementing her height and her hourglass figure. So I realized I wanted something similar for Flora. In the first design I did for her, I gave her the same kind of short gloves, but with these little scalloped edges meant to look like flower petals, which I really like. So I made them look a bit more like flower petals in this new design and incorporated scalloped edges in other places as well, like the hem of her dress, the trim of her boots, and the dainty little choker she wears with a pearl charm. I would have liked to use lace as the design element, but even with this more detailed style, I think it may have just been too much. Another thing consistent across these three redesigns is having an element of the look be sheer. So for Flora, I made it the gloves. Her boots are meant to have an antique feel to them to go along with her romantic vibe, and so for her Charmix, I wanted to go in a similar direction. I gave her a chatelaine that clasps onto the edge of her skirt. Chatelaines were used by women all throughout history to carry things around like charms, little tools, keys, and more. I think the utility of this accessory and the fact that it can represent authority, the lady with the keys is probably the one in charge, makes it a good choice for holding Flora's Charmix, which hangs from the center chain alongside a little egg charm to represent the sacred garden, and a tiny pair of scissors for pruning roses and stuff. I also made the bronze clasp in the shape of a fleur-de-lis, since her fairy form didn't really have anything that matched the armor vibe of Bloom's mantle or Stella's bracers, and it's a floral symbol that is associated with coat of arms. It can also be used in a spiritual or religious way, which I think makes it fit with Flora's whole deal, alongside it feeling kind of old-timey visually. Though I wanted all the Charmix vessels to be glass, I think Flora's is definitely the one that reads as glass the best. The shape feels a bit like a vase and is also sort of loosely meant to look like a leaf. Kind of, if you see it. I changed Flora's wings to look a bit more like leaves as well. I didn't like that she was the only Winx to have such a simple pair of wings. Everyone else's wings have at least two sections to them. By having the two sections of her wings be close in size, shape, and position, I think I found a balance between replicating the original look and matching the vibes of the other girls. Wow, I really put a lot of thought into these redesigns since I just had to make up for the lackluster job I did in the beginning. For anyone who has been around since then and or actually enjoys those redesigns, I cannot thank you enough for being here now. You are truly amazing. Now, I want to try something new with these little drawings and offer them in the form of prints and stickers. I've never done something like this before, but I'd really like to give it a shot. For anyone who would like to make a purchase, I've set up a big cartel shop. The link will be in the description, and I am so grateful for anyone who considers supporting me in this way, but really, I am also just so glad to have you all here with me throughout this project. After college, I went through a bit of an art slump, and all of your encouragement and engagement with my work has kept my ADHD butt motivated to continue creating. You are miracle workers. It's wild to see how far this hypothetical Winx Club reboot has come, and I can't wait to continue the story. I really think you'll enjoy what I have in store. If you're interested in the prints, check them out. Everything is going to be printed locally, personally mailed out by me. There's descriptions of everything on there. But yeah, that's it for this video, and I hope to see you all for part 2 soon. Until then, bye!